When you're listening right now, I have to say thank you, especially when you listen on the day where this podcast gets published, because it's December 25th, and especially in the English-speaking world, it is not common to listen to podcasts on these days. If you listen later, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas time if you are doing Christmas, or had a nice festive season, happy holidays, or just some nice day to relax. If you had to work, thank you very much for your service to communities and to people who you need your services on these days. However, the main point here is many people since October sent me emails and asked me, because as you know, this podcast is based on science, proof and evidence. And in the beginning of October, it started that people sent me emails and said, well, we know the end of the year is approaching. Is there scientific evidence about New Year's resolutions? And I don't mean an opinion. Is there have there been any scientific studies conducted on New Year's resolutions? So I can tell you, during the last weeks, I got very deep into research on New Year's resolutions, because believe it or not, there is scientific research on the effectiveness and efficiency of New Year's resolutions. Because we all know, well, when you listen to this on the publishing day, it's the 25th of December 2025, and probably you had a nice rest, and now you think, well, the New Year is approaching, how do we deal with that? Some people say I do New Year's resolutions, some people say I don't, some people say they work, some people say they don't. And of course, we all know the scientific, the anecdotal evidence that we have from our own experience that people have New Year's resolution, and we all know the New Year's resolutions that failed. For example, people say that was my last cigarette, I will stop smoking. Or people say, I go to the gym, the gyms will be full as usual at the beginning of every year, and usually they become a bit more empty reasonably quickly afterwards. So these New Year's resolutions, is this actually a thing that makes sense, or should we probably avoid them? And of course, first we have to look into certain substantial evidence in the very beginning. When you say, I want to change something, the very first question is, you have to ask, why do you want to do that? And there are certain aspects, 5 in total in the very beginning, that you have to check for. The very first aspect is the physiological aspect. I give you a very, very simple aspect. When you say, let's take the example of going to the gym. When you say, I want to go to the gym, then someone probably will give you a training plan. However, we all know that when you do sports and you want to have a certain result, many of these results are either building up muscle, losing weight, usually both. Often focus on, I want to look better, or I want to look in a certain way. One part of that usually is that you need to eat healthier, because we all know that the junk food is available for pennies somewhere out there. And especially in Central Europe, food is rather cheap. When you now listen from the US or from the UK, that doesn't apply to you, very sorry. However, in every single country, it is the case that junk food is always cheaper than healthy food. So from a physiological point of view, when you have the wish to eat healthier, but you don't have the means to do that, when you say, I can't afford healthier food, there's a barrier we need to talk about first. It doesn't make any sense to start when you know from the very beginning, I can't fulfill the mission. Of course, you can make things better just by saying, I avoid junk food. That's better than eating junk food. Okay, good start. And then you probably eat bread or anything else, which can be healthier. Doesn't necessarily need to be, depending on the bread. However, physiological barriers are just there. You have to talk about them and address them very quickly, including your safety and security as well. When you, for example, have an unsafe environment, when you face an environment in which you live which has domestic violence, or you have parents which have issues with substance abuse, that is also part of when you reach for goals. Often your circumstances can be either very supportive or very problematic. So you have to check for your safety and security first, because you will not reach any goal when you are in unsafe conditions. Of course, you need a social circumstance. You need social circumstances which support you. You need to have an individual situation which is settled and safe, that you do something which you like. And often self-fulfillment should be what you at least partially see, either in your private life or your job life, preferably both. That tremendously helps when you want to achieve goals. If you now say, out of these 5 points, I already have 0 out of 5. Work on that before, because otherwise you will very quickly start something and very quickly see that it's not working. And that's incredibly frustrating. The next step you have to look for is the so-called inner mission. Does what you do align with your true inner mission? I give you a very simple example. Often, and I stick with the example of going to the gym, often people say, well, I want to go to the gym because I want to look better. And when then someone says, well, that's great that you do it for yourself, you just feel better for yourself and probably it helps. And then they say, no, it's not about that. When I want to go out, I want to meet more people. I want to get positive feedback from others. And here, massive warning, not by me, but by Dr. Keltner, who's one of the most well-known professors, University of California, Berkeley, one of the leading professors we have worldwide, who, and I quote, said that external validation is the way to unhappiness. When you rely on external validation constantly, first, you need to work harder and harder and harder to get that. However, there will be the point where you won't get it because biology also works for you. When you say, I want to look in a certain way, here are the news. You will age if you want it or not. And when you then say, well, I can go to the gym first and then there's Botox and then there's plastic surgery and all that. When you do it for yourself, fine. However, when you do it to get external validation, it is a dangerous, dangerous path you're on. So be sure that your inner mission really aligns with what you do. I give you a very simple example. What frequently happens is circle of friends, 5 people. 3 people say, hey, from January 1st, I go to the gym. And the other 2 join because the other 2 only join because the other 3 say, I sign up for the gym. Very quickly, these 2 will drop out because it is not aligned with their inner mission. They just do it because others do it. And of course, we all know that one example that went to press and TV that was not motivated at all, got there by coincidence, and now is a supermodel. Probably 1 person out of 1 million, most likely even less, because I looked for these examples and I didn't find any, but I think they exist somewhere. However, in general, we want to have generally scientific evidence here. In general, the external validation is the path to unhappiness. And of course, what you need on top of that, by the way, the 5 motivational aspect we had in the beginning, when you say, oh, it sounds a bit like Maslow's motivational pyramid, the pyramid of needs. Yes, that's the one, exactly. The inner mission, very important. You find that in my scientific publications. And then, of course, you need circumstances, according to Hertzberg, also scientists working on motivation. You have hygiene factors, for example, good payment, good job, being offered reasonable work. And then there are also motivational factors that you have challenging work, interesting work, ways to develop yourself. Do you have these factors? Because if not, work on these factors first before you set some goal where from the beginning it is very obvious that you can't achieve it. Probably you know these people who say, well, I'm going to start my own business with 50 quid. And then, of course, you know that one person that made it with 50 quid. But you also have to look at the other 999,000 people who didn't make it. Always go by scientific evidence. Just hoping for the coincidental moment is usually not a good plan. And now, of course, the main point, what about science? Is there any science on New Year's resolution? And yes, there is. Professor John C. Norcross actually published scientific evidence exactly and specifically for New Year's resolutions. And there is one aspect here, here the good news before we get to some other news. Good news is that there's something which is called the fresh start effect. When you have certain moments that do not happen very often, then there is a fresh start effect where people say, I will now change because there is a significant event which I take as a reason. There is a certain fresh start effect. However, that effect also, the success of having a resolution here is based on the factors I mentioned before. So you can have as many fresh starts as you want. And we all know the people who on January 1st say, hey, new year, new me. That's the statement that you very often hear. When you have that fresh start effect, but not the circumstances you need, you will not succeed. And I know this is not a motivational talk you probably want to hear at the end of the year. I just want to prevent you from having a massive frustration mid of January. And probably some people are listening who had that for the last 10 years in a row. And I can tell you, most likely it is not your fault because you didn't know the scientific evidence. And now you know what to work on in the first place. So the fresh start effect only works, by the way, because when people say, hey, something new starts, I could say every new week is a fresh start effect. Well, the fresh start effect only works when things don't happen too frequently. Otherwise, you could say the beginning of every new minute is a fresh start. And that's only something that motivational speakers would say. The fresh start effect works only with events that rarely happen. Birthdays, marriages, New Year's resolutions also. And when you now have very clear and specific goals, you also need to know the path to that goal. So, for example, when you say, hey, I go to the gym, that is usually not specific enough. When you say, hey, I go to the gym, I want to build up some muscle, I want to lose weight, and I will build up muscle with a personal trainer that helps me. I will get professional introductions to all the machinery they have there, all the exercises I need to know. I will get professional guidance. I go to the courses on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 6 p.m. So very, very specific to be on the path. That is more likely the way how you can succeed. You need something which is called ambitious realism. You know how to put things in place. When you say, hey, I want to start my business, I want to get into consultancy and consult people on business things, something I hear every single year, and I'm already looking forward to receiving the emails of people telling me, oh, I'm a trainer, speaker, coach now as well, because then I can have more control over my time, so I can make more money and work less. Yeah, if you ignore clients' wishes, that might be the case. Good luck with that. Or people who tell me, oh, it's going to be passive income by video courses only. Yeah, a totally not competitive market where not massive corporations are you're running against. So this ambitious realism needs to be more specific than, oh, I do something and suddenly the magic money trees grows in my backyard. The study, by the way, I'm referring to here is called Auld Lang Syne, Success Predictors, Change Processes, and Self-Reported Outcomes of New Year's Resolvers and Non-Resolvers. And the result of that study is, and that's of course the main point here, buckle up, and I quote, the result of that study is, they checked people doing New Year's resolutions. 46% of the people who had New Year's resolutions were still working on them 6 months later. And now some people might say, that's not too promising, isn't it? It's less than 50%. So first we have to look into what do the numbers say. 46% say statistically it is already after 6 months with only the first look, and I give you the second look in a minute. The first look already tells you 46% means it is more likely that New Year's resolutions fail than they succeeding. So statistics already are against you, and usually scientific statistics, you of course can say, hey, I'm in the 46%. That's what probably everyone says that starts a New Year's resolution. However, the second look on here is in the title of the study. And scientists know that, and this is why this is a very honest study, because it puts it right in the title. It says self-reported outcomes. This is not neutral evidence by a third party. This is not a blind study proving XYZ if it has factually happened. When people get asked, hey, you had a New Year's resolution, are you still working on it, or did you actually achieve it? Some people know when you get asked personally, and of course here you have to ask personally. Anonymous surveys, of course, could have been done as well, but the result usually on self-reported items is pretty much the same. People just start to lie. When people say, hey, I had this New Year's resolution and I took part in this study, and now they ask me if I'm still working on it, and told them I will stop smoking, but I basically start smoking again on January 8th when the first day of business began. So then, of course, people often start to lie. Not everyone, but many people. So when 46% is the number, it already says it's more likely to fail than to succeed. When you know data, and when you know scientific studies, and when you know self-reported scientific studies, you know that the realistic number that could be proven. So when you do the same study again, however, then of course people need to be under surveillance for the whole time, which is of course a very budget-intensive study then for New Year's resolutions. Then you need to check if they really do it, if they follow up. Probably you will end with less than half of that 46%. In my opinion, probably with a fifth of that. So there is still a small number of people following, but when someone says after 6 months they are still working on it, it means they haven't succeeded yet. So when people say, yeah, I'm working on it, it doesn't mean I achieved it. So unfortunately, from a scientific point of view, I have to tell you, and I know this is not the pep talk you like to hear now. Unfortunately, there is a pretty reasonable scientific evidence against New Year's resolutions. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I've never done them. I've done them when I was younger, 14, 15, 16 years old. And usually my New Year's resolution was, oh, I have this amazing game on the Amiga. By the way, Amiga for all is, it was a computer, and yes, I am that old. So, and my New Year's resolution was, oh, I have this amazing game with its amazing sound called Turrican, and next year I'm going to beat the end boss. That was my New Year's resolution at the age of 14 or something. So you see here, it was nothing of big impact. When you have New Year's resolutions, there's one big question. Also, you have to check for additional things. In your circumstances, check for 3 things. So first, what about self-control? I'll give you an example. Self-control, some people are very strong on certain areas of self-control. I will give you an example where I'm good at and where I'm not good at. So first, self-control, I like to work a lot, I like to work hard, and I'm pretty good with that. I still keep my sleeping rhythm so I do not get burned out and can keep up my travels and everything else. So with that, perfect. I am pretty good at that. However, self-control also means, I'm sitting now here recording my podcast. Next to me is a bottle of Coke. And I know that Coke is not healthy. There's too much sugar in there. It's not healthy to drink this. And when people know me from seminars or coachings or whatnot, you know that I drink Coke basically all day. No, not basically. I drink it every day. And I'm aware that this is not healthy. However, every time when I say, let's drink water, I simply say, water doesn't taste that great, so why not drink Coke? And then, of course, someone will say, well, that's not healthy, you will get sick. And I will say, well, my last day sick was in 11th grade at school, haven't been sick ever since. By the way, I'm extremely grateful for that I'm always healthy. And then people say, well, it will catch up with you later. And I say, well, I know many people that have never any issue. And this is going back, and I am not good at the self-control when it comes to drinking a bottle of Coke a day. I usually drink half a liter of Coke every single day of my life. And that's, of course, not great when it comes to self-control. However, I never put myself to the goal saying, stop doing that. There are aspects where you have to know I'm good with self-control in these areas of life, and maybe I'm not that great with self-control on the other areas of life. So, for example, when you say, hey, I want to quit smoking, but my big weakness is as soon as I have people around me who smoke, I want to smoke as well, and I know this and I just simply do it. Are you able to get out of these situations where people smoke? And if so, how do you want to accomplish it? And if not, well, maybe think of your goal or other means that you can do. Because when you want to get rid of smoking, we all know that often many snake oil salesmen tell you, oh, this one magic workshop and everyone stops to smoke, and nothing of that works. It's an addiction and it has to be dealt with accordingly. There are many ways to get out of smoking, but not a single way of them. Not a single one is easy. And if anyone tells you it's easy, look into scientific evidence of smoking addictions. It's not easy. If someone claims otherwise, they just ignore scientific evidence. So aspect number 1 here is self-control. Aspect number 2 is what are your social circumstances? I'll give an example. When you work in, let's say, a challenging situation and you say, I have many people around me, when you now say, hey, my job is average, but okay, but I'm struggling a bit. And many people in my circumstance do as well, but we're good friends. We like each other and everything is reasonably okay. However, I want more from life. I go to university. And the first people who will tell you and make fun of you are probably people close to you. Not all of them, but some of them will say, oh, you're becoming one of these people. Yeah. The study people, the educated ones. I think you're something better than we are. Yeah. So I was born in northern Germany in Hamburg and then lived in Barmstedt, which is close to Hamburg, reasonably close to Hamburg, a very rural area. And when I was one of the few, actually 4 people from my school decided that later we will study. And as soon as we started to say we are going to study later because I wanted to go into teaching, exactly that happened. Certain people in my circumstance said, oh, Niels is going to become one of them, these study people. Today, I think it's a bit better because people have less of a stigma against that studying and think it's less elitist than it was back in the days. My parents pushed me towards it for a very simple reason. They wanted my best. Have I really been into studying without my parents pushing me? Probably not, but my parents knew better than I did when I was young. Thank you very much for that. So the social circumstances can pull you back because the main problem is, let's say when you work in average to challenging circumstances so far, you're happy, but it is challenging maybe financially. You want to have a better job, but you need a degree for that. As soon as you get out of these social circumstances and you, like Phoenix from the ashes, rise above, people do not want to see that. Because many people then know it is only about your own effort and maybe I just have to try harder, but no one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear, hey, it's in your own hands, at least in this case, and you just have to sit down twice a week or 3 times a week and during the evening do your study sessions and then complete the degree. People will pull you back. Hopefully not all of them, but some of them. So I can tell you your social circumstances. Choose social circumstances that are supportive. And by the way, Very important here, do not fall for the trap of toxic positivity. Because I can tell you, many people will say, oh, degrees are not for me. So I go to this cheesy motivational speaker. It's all about bringing life to the next level, all these cliches. And the first thing a motivational speaker will tell you is, be aware. When you come back from this workshop, people will tell you don't go there anymore. They tell you motivational speaking is not what anyone needs. These are the people who do not want to see your growth. These are the people who want to see you fail. These are the people who want to keep you back. No, actually, these are people who know science, and science tells you that motivational speakers do not work longer than 48 or 72 hours. When you go to a motivational speaker, you're highly motivated. 3 days later, you're still sitting there in the same job with absolutely no track record anywhere on the job market and no toolbox that actually helps you. So it's very important that you have social circumstances that are supportive, but on a factual basis, not on a singing, dancing, clapping, chumbawamba basis. And the third aspect here is external help. I'll give you an example. When you, for example, say, well, with the gym, I'm not really good at keeping up the appointments I set myself. As soon as you probably say, I get an external coach, when I don't show up, I still have to pay the coach, and suddenly you show up because, it's all about money. Of course, some people will now say, well, that's probably expensive, and it might be, depending on how you do it. One of my friends who just had tremendous results within 1 year, he said he has an online fitness trainer. And I wondered, how does that work? Because do you take the phone to the gym and then the guy is yelling at you via the phone? He said, no. He meets with his trainer once a week, and then they look at certain things, certain muscle groups. What do they want to do? They look at what he eats, what his sleep rhythm is. They track data. He's wearing things during sleep, etc. So they track everything they can, and then he gets a tailored training plan. And he says when he shows up next week and the data shows he hasn't been to the gym, that guy will be very angry with him, and he doesn't want this guy to be angry. And I tell him, so why don't you just take one of these personal trainers in the gym? I know there are personal trainers in the gym. I mean, I've been a gym member 3 times of my life, went there for 4 weeks, then became supportive member. Really not for me. And when you take these kind of personal trainers with you, you can book them from the gym. And then he says, yeah, Niels, these people start at 70 euros an hour. And I go to the gym 5 days a week. That's 350 euros a week. Per month, that is almost 1,500 euros. I do not have that money. And by the way, neither will I. But who has 1,500 euros just left? And then there are different means. So for example, when you have external help, can be an online fitness trainer or an on-site business fitness center when you have the money for it. But there are different means of external help. And there's scientific evidence that this works. By the way, my services of training, speaking, coaching, mentoring, name it as you like, in the sustainable leadership area is exactly the same. Leaders check in with me, usually not daily. It's either bi-weekly or monthly, but they have coaching sessions to keep their leadership game up to the right level. And by the way, only work with people who are fully qualified for what they do. You wouldn't work with a fitness trainer who says, look, mate, I look great, don't I? I don't have a trainer license, but I look great, right? So get me as a trainer? No, you need to have trainer licenses, and there's a good reason for that. And when you talk about leadership, if anyone tells you they know leadership, but they have zero scientific credentials, and I don't mean degrees. Degrees, of course, are helpful. However, there are different ways. You can do it via edX, via Coursera, university online classes, and whatnot. There are many different versions and options and accesses. However, when someone holds zero scientific evidence to their name and they make a comment on leadership, it is usually comments such as oh, do you know the magic word? It's called please. And that's just leadership training, which is straightforward. Sorry for the wording. It's straightforward garbage. It's nonsensical. Best case is anecdotal evidence, meaning they make something up and tell you a story about that. So it's very important that your external help is qualified for what they do with a real life track record and the academic evidence. And when they're a bit nice, a good personal fit, and also maybe a bit fun and entertaining, that makes a good, well-rounded offer. Taking all that together, when people now say New Year's resolutions, yes or no, looking at the signs, the tendency goes towards a no. New Year's resolutions show a very limited benefit for the people who use them. And probably you know that one example where things worked out, but you probably know hundreds of examples where it didn't. And when you want to plan for a successful future, data-driven decision-making is the key. You do a risk management, and then you decide by data what do you do. Would I recommend anyone to do New Year's resolutions? No, because the risk that you face a massive frustrations mid-January and you will think for months, oh my God, I failed and the year has just begun. That is the big problem that will demotivate you for the rest of the year, maybe even long-term and longer term than just the whole year. New Year's resolutions show limited benefits for the people who use them, because when you want to change something, why do you wait for the new year? Why not start right now? And when you have good reasons, then solve these reasons and then start. You don't need a January 1st to start, because when people tell me, oh, the beginning of the year is not arbitrary, well, it totally is. Just by scientific evidence, because people say, oh, everyone has New Year's. Well, they do, but as you probably have heard, for example, Chinese New Year is not on the same time as as probably German New Year. And that tells you how arbitrary it is. It's just a point in the calendar. So why is that the moment where suddenly everything changes? And when you give me scientific evidence why, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. But most people can't give me that scientific evidence. So very important here, I would strongly recommend you not to do New Year's resolutions. They have limited benefits. When you want to change something, why not do it now? And when, of course, people say, hey, Niels, you didn't go to the gym. Can you tell me an example? Well, I can tell you some examples. So the last 2 years, I finished an MBA besides full-time work, an executive MBA. So the MBA in York, UK, besides full-time work, an executive MBA in London, UK, besides full-time work. And I just now applied for a Master of Science in Management Research, which starts with a Master of Science and then straight goes into a DBA, a doctorate program. And that is running for the next 4 years. And I just successfully got into that mid of December. And I started mid of December. When I get a yes on the December, I don't think it was December, which day was it? Let me just quickly check. I got the yes on the December 16th. I don't need to wait for New Year's Eve to read the first books, open the first PDF, register with the university, or start reading or watching the lectures. I don't need to wait. I don't need a January 1st, and neither do you. So very important is New Year's resolutions. So limited benefits for the ones who use them. Often people try to sell you something with New Year's resolutions, new year, new you. Step away from that. Always look for scientific evidence, real world track record. And when the person helping you is a bit nice, charming, probably a bit entertaining, a bit funny, but however has a real world track record and scientific evidence is most important. The entertainment bit adds to that. When you want to change something, you do not need to wait to the new year. So why not get started now? I wish you all the best. And when you now say, hey, I need to talk about that, that is pretty complex, and I know it is. Feel free to text me. When you send me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, you find the email address also in the show notes of this podcast. What I also put in the show notes is my LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me and contact me on there, or go straight to my website, nb-networks.biz. I put all of that in the show notes of this podcast. You also find the transcript of the podcast in the show notes of you find the transcript of this podcast on my website. Please also join our live sessions. We have live sessions to talk about exactly that. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, then you find a place where you can put your email address in. And every Wednesday morning, you will receive one email. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. You get free access to all the podcasts, free access to all the articles I published. And of course, you find the next live session, date, time, and the URL, the link to access it without any future registration you have to do, just the link and you access it. You find everything in this email, the leadership letter, but we only communicate that via the leadership letter. That's the second thing I recommend you to do. The third thing, however, is the most important one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive outcome that you most likely want to see in your organization, in your circumstance, in your whole life, because otherwise you wouldn't listen to this podcast. I thank you very much for listening to me. We are now heading towards a new year. I wish you a happy new year, a happy, successful year, but I'm very serious with that. And that's the most important thing here. I wish you a happy, healthy new year, 2025. Because at the end of this podcast, as usual, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.